to instigate hate against the Tutsi, which led to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. The same words that killed 1 million Tutsi in 1994 in Rwanda are killing Tutsi today in DRC. The same genocidal ideology has crossed the border into DRC, and the hate rhetoric as a tool of dissemination of that genocidal ideology has been adopted as a political state discourse to fuel regional instability and conflict. What we are witnessing, in fact, today in the region is what Dr. Suzanne Benesch, expert on speech, calls dangerous speech, or speech that can increase the risk that its audience will condone or participate in violence against members of another group. Suzanne Benesch observed that fear-inducing, divisive rhetoric rises steadily before outbreaks of mass violence. One familiar example of dangerous speech is dehumanization, in which people are often described as insects, vermin, bacteria, or cancer. There are many examples of how dangerous speech is used today to fuel regional instability, and some of those examples will be presented to us today. So let me introduce our speakers. We have on this panel Dr. Michael Weiner, Human Rights Officer on Equality and Non-Discrimination Branch, who will address the global hate speech response priorities of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We will have Ambassador James Ndiragu, Chair Rapporteur from the Working Group on Effective Implementation of the DDPA, who will address the Working Group's mandate and recent work, pinpointing DDPA implementation gaps and challenges, and propose practical steps to enhance its impact. Online, we will have Ambassador Pierre Prosper Richard, who will address DDPA's origin, overview, and assessment. We will also have Ms. Florida Kabasinga online, who will present the Levy Firestone Muse LFM report's principal findings and conclusions. Mr. Innocent Tizi, who will be showing the danger of hate speech when it becomes normalized and state-supported. Mr. Bernard Manguin, next to him, will address the legal cases of hate speech. Ms. Alice Nderitu Wairimu online will discuss hate speech early warning systems and genocide prevention frameworks. Honorable Dr. Emmanuel Ugirashebuja, Rwanda's Minister of Justice, will present Rwanda's legal framework addressing hate speech, incitement, and genocidal ideology. We will open the floor for concise, solution-oriented interventions. And then we will have closing remarks by Honorable Mr. Olivier Nduhungirehe, Rwanda's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who will then deliver the closing remarks and call to action. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Weiner.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for organizing this very important and timely event on countering hate speech. And actually, already 25 years ago, as the moderator was alluding to, the Durban Declaration and Program of Action reaffirmed that any form of impunity for crimes motivated by racist and xenophobic attitudes plays a role in weakening the rule of law and democracy and tends to encourage the recurrence of such acts. And it also addressed and called upon states, while taking all necessary measures to guarantee freedom of opinion and expression, to consider, and I quote, a prompt and coordinated international response to the rapidly evolving phenomenon of the dissemination of hate speech and racist material through the new information and communications technologies. So that's already 25 years ago. Then subsequently, the Durban Review outcome document took up our proposal of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to organize a series of expert workshops to attain a better understanding of the legislative patterns, judicial practices, and national policies in the different regions of the world with regard to the concept of incitement to hatred, in order to assess the level of implementation of the prohibition of incitement as stipulated in Article 20 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights organized subsequently 5 regional workshops, actually in Bangkok, Nairobi, Rabat, Santiago de Chile, and Vienna. And the resulting Rabat Plan of Action highlights that all states have the responsibility to build a culture of peace and a duty to put an end to impunity. Let me briefly highlight the core of the Rabat Plan of Action, which actually has been picked up quite a lot by a lot of international and regional bodies. It's a 6-part threshold test to define and to identify what constitutes incitement to hatred and violence. So this takes into account 6 questions. First, the social and political context. Second, the status of the speaker. Third, his or her intent to incite an audience against a target group. Fourth, the content of the speech. Fifth, the extent of its dissemination. And finally, the likelihood of harm, including imminence. In terms of key global trends, we remain very much concerned on the one hand, so it's like 2 sides of one coin, about the non-prosecution of perpetrators who actually crossed the incitement threshold. And on the other side, about the chilling effect of persecuting minorities or dissenters under the guise of vague or overbroad domestic legislation. Therefore, our prevention and response priorities focus on facilitating both national and regional bodies to find the fine line between hate speech and free speech. And on the OHCHR website, we actually have uploaded 34 different translations of the Rabat threshold test in open access, and this has also been used in very practical terms. Let me highlight briefly partnership opportunities and concrete legal impact of this Rabat Plan of Action. It has been referred already in several judgments at the regional level by the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Similarly, at the regional level, the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers' recommendation on combating hate speech also relies on the 6-part threshold test. Similarly, with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, we have cooperated notably with its Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which regularly quotes the Rabat Plan of Action. And just briefly also on the national level, just to highlight, in Sri Lanka, both the Supreme Court and High Court and also the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka have relied on the Rabat threshold test as highlighted last October in the most recent report by the Secretary General on combating intolerance based on religion or belief. Finally, also at the national level, some audiovisual media regulatory authorities, notably in Morocco, Tunisia, and Côte d'Ivoire, have collaborated on using the Rabat Plan of Action. And this has been also highlighted in a practical guide by the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. The UN General Assembly and the Human Rights Council also have actually referred to the Rabat Plan of Action in 70 resolutions over the last 15 years, as did also the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, notably in its general recommendation on combating racist hate speech, and also the UN Human Rights Committee in its general comment on the right of peaceful assembly. To conclude, I wish to quote High Commissioner Volker Türk, who in a report welcomed the use of the Rabat threshold test in more than a dozen decisions by Meta's Oversight Board, I quote, which may have a significant impact for online content moderation, affecting over 3 billion monthly active users of Facebook globally. However, more needs to be done to effectively address hate speech, unquote. And for this, of course, we need the consistent involvement of the technology companies, of states, of the relevant UN entities, of regional bodies, and civil society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wiener. Ambassador Ndiragu, your turn.
Oh, thank you, Excellencies. Good afternoon. Today, we gather to reaffirm our commitment to the principles of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, the DDPA. As 25 years later, as has been said, these documents remain as key milestones in fighting racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. They do provide a framework for addressing these issues and more so the historical roots of contemporary racism, which persistently, unfortunately, plagues our society today. But we're not just here to reflect on the past, but to act in the present and to secure a better future for the generations to come. As we do these reflections, we must confront a very grim reality: the growing prevalence of hate speech. Impunity for hate speech persists in many parts of the world. Impunity for hate speech is not just a legal matter, it's a social scourge that fuels violence and regional instability. As has been said, when hate speech goes unchecked, it breeds an environment where intolerance can thrive, leading to the dehumanization of entire communities. But let's think about it. When individuals in power with influence make hateful remarks without consequence, they create a ripple effect. These words resonate beyond their initial utterances. They embolden others to act on their prejudices. They legitimize animosity and mistrust amongst communities. This is not a theoretical concept. Unfortunately, it's a lived reality that violence, displacement, and loss of life follows. So hate speech is not merely words. It's a toxic seed that grows into violence and despair. And this truth cannot be ignored. For history has shown us time and time again, where hate flourishes, violence soon follows. The Intergovernmental Working Group on the Effective Implementation of the DDPA is one of the three crucial mechanisms that ensure commitments we made in Durban are not forgotten, but are realized. This is not just another multilateral mechanism. It's a beacon of hope, illuminating our path forward in addressing the enduring legacies of enslavement, colonialism, and systemic discrimination. It serves one of those pillars that support our dedication to eradicating these legacies. We must further acknowledge that the fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, including hate speech, is a battle for the very souls of our societies. Under the auspices of this working group, of which I'm honored to chair, and we do meet in this room, we are currently developing a draft declaration concerning the human rights of people of African descent. While this is an initial phase, we see it as a significant advancement. It's a vital negotiation to acknowledge and address the injustices experienced. We seek to amplify the voices of those who have been silenced for far too long. Our efforts are motivated by the recognition of our duty to ensure that the DDPA is not just historic, but is a current document. Excellencies, we all know that well that words have power. They can incite and inflame. They can foster division and hatred. However, they can also inspire unity and understanding. The difference between those two outcomes often rests in how we respond to hate speech. Our collective response to the hate speech is therefore very urgent. This fight against impunity requires the collective efforts from government, civil society, the media, and individuals. We must hold ourselves accountable for the words and our narratives. The time has come for us to turn these words into action. Silence in the face of hate is complicity in the hate. Speaking up is the most powerful weapon. As I close, the Durban Declaration is a call to action, and this is our call to action. We are urged to create a world where diversity is celebrated and everyone lives free from discrimination and fear. A world free from hate, where individuals, regardless of their background, feel safe and valued. So to break the cycles of intolerance and resultant instability that haunt our society, in our negotiations of the draft UN Declaration, let us commit to these principles and speak out against hate that fosters a culture of peace and tolerance. Let us renew our commitment to fighting racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Let us all work tirelessly to combat hate speech and its tragic consequences. Silence is not an option. Let us build bridges, of understanding. And best of all, and lastly, let us all remember that our strength lies in our unity as we work towards a more peaceful and just world for all. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ndiragu. We will have a speaker online. This is Ambassador Pierre Prosper Richard.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Excellencies and distinguished guests. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I just want to pass a few reflections on this, the Durban Declaration and the work that has occurred over the years. The prior speakers have had an opportunity to cover much of what I would talk about regarding the history, but I think it's important to raise a few additional points regarding the Durban Declaration and the actions that have taken place since that time. As we know, in 2001, the world committed itself or recommitted itself to fight discrimination, racism across the world. We did see much progress in the sense where we saw nations begin to enact legislations and actually make important declarations for the protection of people and minorities. During that period, not only was I a representative in the United States government, but I also served on the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And in fact, I was there for 8 years and I served as the vice chairman. And during that process, we were able to see an increase in the ratification by nations who would come to before our committee and begin to share with us the progress and the work that they were making to combat racism. But during that time, I must say that most of our focus was on obviously legislation. It was on issues of equal treatment and equal rights for various groups. The focus was not a sharper focus as we are doing today on the issue of hate speech. Those issues did come up, but they were more intermittent. Now, with the passage of time, we're seeing as the prior speakers have said, a dramatic increase in this issue. So the question we have for ourselves is the way ahead. Where are we now, and what do we plan to do? The issue of the digital platforms that people are using to promote and advance hate speech has become very serious. It's become serious as technology has increased. It is no longer an issue of a publication in a newspaper or a few statements on television or radio. Now, with platforms such as TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, these messages can be conveyed rapidly and with these algorithms conveyed in a way that they are perceived to be the truth. There's an element of group thinking that evolves and takes place, and the recipient of this information has no access or is not inundated with counter information. So they begin to believe what they hear. And this is very, very concerning, especially for vulnerable minds, people who can be indoctrinated into this pattern or belief of hate. So we, as this group, and we as a world, have a greater responsibility now to really come up with guidelines and mechanisms to learn how to deal with these issues. And I know Dr. Wiener discussed the idea of working with internet and tech companies. I think that is a critical issue, not only to work with them, but we need to begin to look at the issues of what can nations do in their legislations to help curb hate speech. Now, we must be mindful of the fact that free speech is important as well. So our guidelines must be sure to draw the clear distinction. Given that we have limited time, I just want to raise one issue as we begin to look forward. We cannot underestimate the challenges that we will have with AI. AI has gotten to the point where videos, voice, pictures can be manipulated to the point where they are perceived to be true. And that information can be communicated very, very quickly. And it could be communicated in a way that could cause great instability on a moment's notice. So I think as we begin to look forward and we look forward to the next 25 years, we need to be mindful of these issues and determine a path forward that will allow us to not only curb these abuses, but also end the scourge of hate speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We will have Ms. Florida Kabasinga, who is a Rwandan lawyer and former international prosecutor, online as well.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you for the opportunity to address this session on a report that a group of lawyers from all over the world wrote end of June 2025 on the safety of Congolese Tutsi and Banyamulenge. This group of lawyers of more than 20 came up with this report after conducting an investigation on the public record by interviewing subject matter experts, by looking through social media and what had been out there on this subject as of June 2025 last year. This report was written by a law firm in the United States, Levy Firestone Muse, in collaboration with a bunch of other lawyers across the world, including here in Rwanda. This law firm has extensive expertise in historical investigations, and our team 33 pages. It will be difficult to steal what is in that in only a few minutes, but I will concentrate on the key findings that are crucial to the discussions that are being had in Geneva today. One of the key findings that we as a team came up with is that militia violence has forced Congolese Tutsi and Banyamulenge to flee their villages and seek refuge in other parts of the DRC, with many quitting the country altogether. We also found that anti-Tutsi and anti-Banyamulenge hate speech is rampant, both on the internet and on the ground in the DRC. We found that under President Tshisekedi, the Congolese government has contributed to the persecution of Congolese Tutsi and Banyamulenge. And as an example, in November 2022, the president himself publicly stated, all Congolese, whatever their tribe or ethnicity, will by all means have the same rights and freedom. However, Congolese Tutsi or Hutu should demonstrate that the interests of Congo come first before those of Rwanda. This goes against the DRC constitutional provision that says the state has the duty to ensure and promote the peaceful coexistence of all ethnic groups in the country. It also ensures the protection and promotion of vulnerable groups and all minorities. Among the findings for which we came to conclusions is that there are numerous reasons to be concerned and this goes
Yes, technology. Ms. Kabasinga, can you hear us?
the government threatened Congolese and Banyamulenge civilians. The proliferation of anti-Tutsi rhetoric throughout the DRC heightens the risk of atrocity crimes. We also found that the Congolese government has backed anti-Tutsi militias in North Kivu, and the DRC military has collaborated with the FDLR. In a June 2023 UN Group of Experts report, it was found that FDLR closely collaborated with local armed groups and with the FARDC. Colonel Ruhinda of the FDLR was founded by the UN experts group to have attended several planning meetings with the National Army of the DRC in Kichanga on 10th and 11th December 2022 and on 10 January 2023, and was provided with weapons and ammunition by the FARDC. It further found that within the same period, several sources reported that Omega Israel, who is an FDLR commander, had held meetings in Goma with the FARDC military hierarchy to discuss collaboration. Congolese personnel have been accused of groups in South Kivu that have then gone on to attack Banyamulenge. We further found that Congolese authorities have been accused of detaining Tutsi and Banyamulenge on false pretenses. In April 2024, Amnesty International reported that several members of the Tutsi and Banyamulenge communities were arrested or abducted, detained and held incommunicado. Others faced sham trials, accused of supporting M23 rebels or spying for the Rwandan government. We also found that Congolese officials have encouraged vigilantism, inciting violence against Tutsi and Banyamulenge. North Kivu, as an example, North Kivu Police Deputy Commissioner General Abba Van Ang in May 2022 publicly stated that, "Tell your grown-up children or your wives that everyone gets a machete or a tool that can kill someone so that the war against the enemy becomes a popular war. Go and sensitize your brothers and sisters to take up machetes for this war to be popular." Am I making myself? We have other examples that we found on social media, for example, on YouTube, X, and others. One example that stood out was Professor Iya Lengi, who said, "People have understood that for our country to be liberated, the Tutsi in our country must die. It is like someone who is sick from a virus. If the virus doesn't die, the person cannot heal. For example, the virus of COVID, people took medicine, vaccines, because the virus had to die so that they can heal. The Tutsi are viruses in our country." There were statements such as, "We encourage them to exterminate all Tutsi in Congo." And we found that this is not rhetoric that had only been there in the 2020s. As an example of a historical hate speech, we found that in October 1963, members of the North Kivu Parliament publicly stated that he had been expelled without condition because he constitutes a public danger. A former prosecutor in the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, I must caution that hate speech is not mere hate speech. We have in this country examples of a proof of concept where hate speech became a genocide, became ideal, commit genocide, and indeed was followed by mass murder and violence. In the report, we came to the following conclusion. Congolese Tutsi and Banyamulenge face substantial and grave threats to their lives and livelihoods amid an epidemic of militia violence and hate speech that DRC authorities have failed to contain and in various ways have exacerbated. In conclusion, impunity must be fought against by the government that has primary jurisdiction, and that is the government of the DRC. There must be a push to ensure accountability for online content that qualifies as hate speech incitement to violence, violence to genocide, incitement to genocide, and genocide ideology. There must be collaboration between countries that have jurisdiction, for example, subject matter jurisdiction, territorial and personal jurisdiction, just to mention but a few. But there must not be complacence. We have seen in Rwanda what people qualify as mere hate speech actually results into. More than 1 million people dead. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So we will have now Mr. Innocent Ntezi, who is a member of East African Law Society and former prosecutor, who will introduce his presentation.
Thank you for inviting me to this important event to talk about the legal gaps that persist regionally regarding hate speech and how they can be addressed. My presentation has two parts. First, we'll watch a short video showing that hate speech is not just theory. It's real. It's happening within government, institution, official medias, religious setting, and even segment of civil society in DRC. I cordially invite you to watch the video. Thank you.
C'est le même principe, Oscar, le perfidie, qui fait que lorsque vous épousez aujourd'hui une femme Tutsi, il faut faire attention. Ah bon? Oui, il faut faire attention parce que on vous donne une femme, mais vous allez recevoir un membre de la famille, un cousin, un neveu qui viendra chez vous. De la famille de la femme. Et on va vous présenter comme le neveu, le cousin, alors que ce n'est pas un neveu, ce n'est pas un cousin, c'est la personne qui viendra faire les enfants avec votre épouse à la maison. Et on vous dira que non, les enfants naissent Tutsi comme des Tutsi parce que la race Tutsi est supérieure, alors que c'est une perfidie. Mais j'ai conféré, à échanger avec quelqu'un qui connaît les Rwandais, particulièrement les Tutsis. Ils ont développé d'autres connotations conférant à l'intelligence des sens maléfiques. Cette intelligence a été habillée par les Rwandais de coutumes, de costumes, de ruses, de perfidies, des mensonges, des malinités, d'escroqueries. Obenge est devenu synonyme de subterfuge, stratagème, feinte, tromperie, désinformation, déloyauté, manipulation, astuce, intoxication, manœuvre dilatoire, infidélité, une intelligence maléfique, alibi, capacité de nuire, mauvaise foi, abus de confiance. Le Wenge, c'est aussi la malveillance, la traîtrise, le non-respect des engagements, le manquer à la parole donnée, feindre la réalité, duplicité, fourberie, hypocrisie, infidélité. Et ça, on enseigne cela aux enfants. Et ça, le bas âge. C'est devenu une culture qu'on enseigne aux enfants dès le bas âge pour devenir fides. Il n'y a pas une tribu qui s'appelle Banyamulenge.
Quand tu vois un Tutsi paillé, un criminel. Un criminel.
Il faut se méfier de Tutsi.
Un criminel, mais.
Il faut se méfier. Même si Katumbi serait congolais d'un côté, même s'il serait, en français, oui, oui. J'appelle tous les Congolais de ne jamais le voter à cause de sa femme. Ah, écoutez, même à cause de sa femme, il ne faut pas approcher cet individu.
Il faut neutraliser tous les officiers Tutsi Wazanakata FARDC. La solution tient en cette phrase. La neutralisation des 545 ou 550 officiers Tutsi Nakata FARDC.
Si on ne réussit pas par les armes et les bombardements, on peut vous avoir dans une salle d'opération. Tu vois qui kolongola appendice, toka tirin. Et sengeli motomoko yana maloba po batonyo soba yamba yango, beto tambola. Tolobi Congolais si ko zali. Bango bazali koyoke la biso mawate. opération Luka Famina ye, Toronto, Québec, Vancouver.
Bazalendo, musirabishe masasi yetu bure kumwili ya Munyarwanda. Musirabishe hata lisasi yetu moya mumwili ya Munyarwanda. Mi nataka mubachune, mubachinje.
Have been observed has led to extreme violence, including acts of cannibalism, targeting both Tutsi Banyamulenge, soldiers and civilians. Some of the most disturbing cases among 100 are: on December 9th, 2021, Major Kaminzobe Joseph, a Tutsi Munyamulenge, was abdicated from a vehicle in Lueba. He was lynched, burned, and eaten in front of his colleagues. November 9th, 2023, Captain Gisori Kabongo, also a Tutsi Munyamulenge, was killed in similar manner in Goma. June 18, 2022, a Munyamulenge farmer, Tayowergwa, in Kalima, was stoned, burned, and publicly cannibalized on camera. 17, 2024, Officer Sabandore was beaten and burned alive in Goma. The Hema community in Ituri suffered the same fate of violence as the Tutsi Banyamulenge. These acts were followed by the destruction of Tutsi Banyamulenge villages, the looting of their cattle, and the blockade using drones with the intention of wiping the Tutsi and Banyamulenge from the map of the DRC. Despite this repeat hate speech, region court and the international court, as well as many human rights organizations, has largely remained silent. Meanwhile, the Tutsi and the Banyamulenge communities, Congolese, continue to suffer. This silence is deeply concerning. Many countries in the region, including the DRC, have strong laws prohibiting hate speech. The problem is not absence of legal framework. The problem is lack of enforcement, often driven by political interest and poor governance. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Bernard Manguin, who is an independent law practice professional, a long-term lawyer.
Je voudrais d'abord faire une observation.
May I thank you for giving me the floor. I'd like to make a warning. What I'm going to say here today in front of you, I would like to have the same opportunity in a conference organized by the DRC in Kinshasa. And the people that I have the honor to represent are Congolese. A couple of minutes ago, you did see a video, the speech of Mr. Kenge, who is for RDC, and our group did launch a complaint to the general prosecutor, as well as to the International Tribunal for Mr. Kitenge's hate speech, not only citing it, but placing it historically, because the devaluation of women Tutsi is a long history in the Great Lake region. This is part of a continuous rhetoric. And since then, I can tell you that hate speeches have been multiplying. And we, in the complaint that we have launched, we have not only the analysis of the hate speech of Mr. Ikenge, the analysis of its historical place in history, and also the presentation, the complete presentation of all the complaints that we launched since 2020 up to today. None of these complaints have been followed of any effect or impact. As you know, when you launch a complaint, it is being launched confidentially, but we decided as a group of lawyers to make it public to whoever wants to take cognizance of it. If at the end of this meeting you so wish, please give us your email addresses and we will send you the content of the planes and the tens of hate speeches that have been uttered in the Great Lakes regions in the eastern part of our DRC over the years, and why these speeches of hatred are not being combated. We need to have a result. When there was a complaint against Mr. Pitakira, all the people who were in the video you just saw are concerned. You know, this the cannibalism, the kadima, and all this have been presented before courts without any consequence and effect. What we are noting, on the contrary, when the human rights, the Security Council is being seized in New York, all of a sudden I see a man called Mr. Mubenga is calling the Tutsi that they are cockroaches and people or viruses that need to be destructed and killed. And this person is being welcomed solemnly by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of DRC and by Mr. Patrick Ouaya, who is a spokesperson who is really indulging in false pretenses of peace in DRC, and even by the president of the DRC. I cited Mr. Mubanga. I could also cite many other cases. Journalist Chancellor, Mr. Kalunji, Malon Rusaramamu, Yves Mukanga, all these are propagators of hate speech who are receiving positive echo in the authorities. How can, therefore, our complaint be heard, and how can we make them respect the rule of law and justice in the Great Lakes region? Let us not imagine that these are not recent phenomena. We did talk about the Tutsis and Banyamulenge, and the Tutsis of North Kivu, and our Hema friends. And a couple of days ago, I did receive a call for assistance from refugees of Ebule in the Ituri region, in the Saint Joseph church, which was destroyed. Thousands of people are waiting there, confined in a small territory, and the person who said that civilians will be confined and they could be killed is the spokesperson of the armed forces of the DRC, Mr. Gilles Ngongo. So let us go into the substance, and let us be bold enough to say that there is a major problem relating to the rule of law. And I'll end by saying the question that we lawyers are asking: how can we transform this rotten circle into a virtuous circle? We are today officially, as lawyers, for the people we are defending, who are the daily victims and civilians. These are not authorities. These are not political speculators. These are people who are living on a daily basis with suffering. So the prosecutors of all the countries in the Great Lakes regions, Uganda, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and see how we can pursue offers of hate speech, because hate speech is a crime, and behind the hate speech there is a physical destruction of human beings. I thank you.
Maître Manguin. Now, former special advisor on the prevention of genocide, Ms. Alice Nderitu, online.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you. And Excellencies, I will begin with some history. In 1994, more than 1 million Tutsi were murdered in Rwanda in just 100 days. As we know, the genocide against the Tutsi did not begin with physical weapons, it began with words. Through radio broadcasts, newspapers, and organized propaganda, the Tutsi had been systematically dehumanized for decades. They were labeled cockroaches, described as weeds to be uprooted. Violence was framed as a cleanup. Their extermination as human beings reframed as sanitation. This language was not incidental, it was intentional. It prepared ordinary people, teachers, nurses, cobblers, and to accept and ultimately participate in genocide. Hate speech classified the population into categories of us and them, pure and impure, human and inhuman. Once the Tutsi were removed from the circle of moral concern, their complete extermination became not only possible, but publicly rationalized. The lesson is therefore very clear. Genocide is preceded by narrative construction, and hate speech does not merely reflect violence, it prepares it. In the landmark media case, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda convicted radio executives and a newspaper editor from RTLM Radio and Kangura newspaper for genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide and crimes against humanity. The tribunal affirmed a fundamental principle of international law: when speech directly and publicly calls for the destruction of a protected group, it constitutes a criminal act. The tribunal recognized that such speech was not merely inflammatory rhetoric and concluded that the accused caused deaths without ever wielding a physical weapon. Their words and broadcasts were instruments of extermination. These verdicts established a historic and critical legal precedent, demonstrating individual criminal responsibility when communication is transformed into hate speech as a tool of annihilation. And yet, the legal record alone does not guarantee prevention. While significant convictions were secured, thousands of perpetrators were never prosecuted. Millions fled into the Democratic Republic of Congo, creating a militia, the FDLR, launching frequent attacks on Rwanda, and murdering the Congolese Tutsi they found there. Many people indicted for genocidal crimes remain at liberty, living free lives in the DRC and many other countries. Some continue to propagate the same genocidal, divisive, and dehumanizing narratives, including rhetoric and violence targeting Tutsi communities beyond Rwanda's borders, such as the Congolese Tutsi. Compounding this risk is the persistence of genocide denial and distortion, and the speed at which unverified information travels online. Despite judicial findings and extensive evidentiary records, attempts continue to distort history, minimize the scale of crimes, or rehabilitate perpetrators. Genocide denial is not an abstract intellectual exercise. It undermines accountability, it re-traumatizes survivors, and it weakens the normative barriers that protect vulnerable communities. So hate speech, genocide denial, and impunity are interconnected risks. Hate speech prepares the ground. Genocide denial prepares for a repetition of the crime. I note that I've been issuing warnings about the danger to the Congolese Tutsi for years, including in my previous capacity as Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. Early warning must therefore be linked to early action. A lot more must continue to be done. Monitoring hate speech and incitement to violence, including in digital environments and public discourse, strengthening national legal frameworks, addressing direct and public incitement to genocide, supporting independent and responsible media, and investing in civic education are measures to safeguard against the instrumentalization of speech for destruction. And of course, cross-border and cross-sector collaboration between governments, especially in the Great Lakes region, civil society, academia, and media institutions is essential. So as a country, we have much to learn from Rwanda, because Rwanda's response to the genocide against the Tutsi offers the world practical guidance. Survivor testimony has been integrated into education system. Civic and unity initiatives have sought to rebuild a shared national identity over ethnic division. Legal frameworks have addressed genocide ideology and incitement. Community-based dialogue mechanisms strengthen social cohesion and reconciliation, and national efforts recognize that words can dismantle the moral architecture of a society, but at the same time, words can also reinforce it. So, as we reflect on the lessons of the genocide against the Tutsi, we must reaffirm that the protection of human rights requires vigilance at the early stages of dehumanization and the risks the Congolese Tutsi face. I had asked for a document to be distributed to you all so that you can see the similarity of the rhetoric that happened before the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 and the rhetoric that is happening and that has happened for years now, that made me issue warnings that the Congolese Tutsi were actually in real danger and risk factors for genocide have existed in relation to them for a very long time. So when we are discussing hate speech, we know hate speech stripped them as a group of their humanity, but it also allowed the violence that has been going on for so many years. I thank you. George.
So I'm just going to speak very loud, I guess, but I'm not sure if they're going to hear me online. Yes, okay, it's working now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Derry. Too, we're going to have Honorable Dr. Emmanuel Ugera-Shijubuja, who is going to speak now. We will have then the closing remarks as the time has run, and we will conclude. The exchange, of course, is very important, and we hope that this event will spark the needed attention to have discussion going forward. So, Honorable Ugera-Shijubuja, please. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Boyana. Rwanda has a very strong stance against hate speech and genocide-related rhetoric because of our history, but also because of the international obligations that we subscribe to, such as the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. As has been said, the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi claimed lives of over 1 million people in just 100 days, fueled in large part by propaganda and hate speech that was spread through media outlets like radio. You all know about RTLM and Kangura, which was a newspaper that spread hate speech. This tragic experience shaped Rwanda's legal and social framework today. Rwanda has laws criminalizing genocide ideology, denial, and hate speech. These laws are designed to prevent any rhetoric that could incite division of violence. Hate speech is not just about offensive words. It is always a precursor to violence when it dehumanizes or targets groups, as has been said by the previous speakers, with very concrete examples. Genocide, including the genocide against the Tutsi, is never a spontaneous event, as is always defined by many people. There are many other conditioned precedents that lead to violence, which the worst of it is genocide, including hate speech, of course, and ideology, genocide ideology. Genocide is always meticulously planned, and it unfolds over the years, with the plan implemented to the minute detail. You all know about the 10 stages of genocide. And this is a similar pattern you find in any where genocide takes place or any other form of violence. For us in Rwanda, the tragic history of our country is a long process that started just a few years after independence, with decades of dehumanizing and anti-Tutsi pogroms which followed. Just to give you quick examples, because we don't have a lot of time here. In 1957, there was the Bautu Manifesto developed by certain Rwandans in collaboration with the Belgian colonizers, which laid foundation for the genocide project. 2 years later, in 1959, the first set of the Hutu 10 Commandments were developed. 2 months after the development of the 1959 Hutu 10 Commandments, that's 2 months after, the first massacre of the Tutsi took place on a day called the All Saints' Day, which is the 1st of November, where men, women, and children were massacred under the pretext of a revolution. This was followed by exile of many Tutsis in 1959. From then onwards, a Tutsi ceased to be regarded as human like any other. He or she was considered to be the child of a snake or a cockroach. And the Tutsi children were subjected to physical and psychological trauma in order to push them to drop out of school. So this is the experience. But what is so surprising is that we are seeing it recurring in our region again. In DRC, as has been pointed out, exactly the same pattern. But what surprises us is that there is again a similar pattern that we are seeing, which is that at the heart of these tragedies, there is always the failure of international community to heed to the call for the help of those who are being persecuted and who are facing extermination. So we are seeing again the failure of international community. Madam Nderitu spoke about numerous early warnings about the genocide. These warnings were there when the genocide against the Tutsi was being prepared. Just to give you the context, let me highlight some of the early warnings. In April 1993, that was 1 year before the genocide against the Tutsi, the UN Special Rapporteur on summary, arbitrary, and extrajudicial executions, a gentleman by the names of René Degni Segui, conducted a mission to Rwanda. In August 1993, Segui reported to the UN Human Rights Commission that the trial of massacres of Tutsis had already begun and constituted genocide under the 1948 genocide against the Tutsis. That was in August 1993. The general who was heading the UN mission in Rwanda, General Romeo Dallaire, repeatedly warned the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations. Dallaire informed the DPKO in New York that the Hutu extremists were planning a campaign to exterminate Tutsis. In a well-known cable that now is open to New York on January 11th, 1994, Dallaire requested authority to search for and seize machetes and other weapons that had been shipped into Rwanda for the Hutu militias known as the Interahamwe. However, someone who was there working as the deputy to the Undersecretary General of DPKO, Iqbal Riza, denied Dallaire permission to act, citing that it exceeded UNAMIR's mandate. Instead, he instructed Dallaire to take the information to the Rwandan government, many of whose members were deeply involved in planning the genocide. So these early warnings underscore the tragic failure of international community, which we continue to see today in what is happening in the region. Of course, Rwanda never understands why these conspicuous early warnings are ignored by the international community. Is it because the lives of the victims are not worth saving? So these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves, given the experience that we've gone through in Rwanda. So we've had a lot of these international mechanisms, like the DDPA. In 2005, we had R2P, and many others continue to be developed. But the question is, what do we use those particular tools to in order to stop genocide or any other related violence? So Rwanda has heeded to the call of its international obligations by coming up with laws that punish the crime of hate speech and genocide ideology, so that for Rwandans we don't go back to our history, but at the same time ensure that this violence and genocide ideology, which is a precursor to any violence, is curbed at an early stage. Of course, the Rwandan laws, you may want to know that they are not that different from other laws that we see around. Very similar to the German Penal Code, Article 130 of the German Penal Code, very similar. Our Rwandan laws are very similar to the German Penal Code that criminalize incitement against groups based on race, religion, ethnicity, and also punishes the crime of minimization or denial of the Holocaust. So this is where we are as Rwanda. We want to observe our international obligations, but also play an important role in curbing the early stages of genocide and any other form of ideology, violence ideology. Thank you very much. I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. We will have closing remarks by Minister Nduhungirehe.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to start by thanking our panelists for their insightful contributions and for enriching our reflections today. Your expertise and lived experiences have deepened this important conversation. I also wish to thank you all participants for your engagement and commitment to this critical issue. Today's exchange has confirmed something we already know from history and from painful lived experience, is that hate speech is not just speech. When it goes unchallenged, so when it is normalized, when it is politically instrumentalized, it becomes an enabling factor for violence. 25 years after the adoption of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, incitement to discrimination and violence remains widespread and in many contexts is tolerated or exploited by political actors. Despite the creation of this important declaration and normative framework, hate speech continues to resurface as a recurrent driver of instability and conflict. And this should alarm us all. The Great Lakes region offers a stark reminder. Genocidal ideology and hate speech did not disappear after 1994. It was reorganized and found a new fertile ground in Eastern DRC. The continued presence of the FDLR, genocidal militia, a UN-sanctioned armed group created by the perpetrators of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, illustrates how impunity allows violent ideologies to persist and spill across generations. Where hate speech is left unchecked, three things happen. First, the exclusion of minority groups becomes normalized. Natives are labeled as foreigners, and communities have their genuine grievances dismissed or trivialized. Second, discrimination becomes systemic. It becomes embedded in local politics, security structures, and armed mobilization. And third, violence becomes predictable. Rwanda speaks on this matter with the weight of history. Our country was directly devastated by hate speech and genocidal ideology in 1994. We continue to witness how such rhetoric circulates in our region, especially in the Great Lakes and Eastern DRC, where hate speech remains one of the root causes of recurrent conflicts and humanitarian crises. We therefore wish to raise the alarm once again. More must be done. Prevention must be prioritized. Accountability must be strengthened. Silence and complacency only embolden those who weaponize identity and dehumanization. The question is not whether we recognize the warning signs, but whether we will act in time. In South Kivu, violence has already escalated alarmingly, with the Banyamulenge community in the high plateau of Minembwe facing systematic targeting and the humanitarian blockade based on ethnic basis. These developments are clear signs of an ongoing ethnic cleansing and constitute material evidence of crimes against humanity. In light of these urgent realities, allow me to conclude with two forward-looking proposals. First, we encourage the establishment of an informal, cross-regional group of friends on combating hate speech and impunity, open to interested member states and partners. This platform could meaningfully contribute to the Durban Plus 25 reflection process by facilitating the exchange of national and regional experiences and by advancing practical cooperation on prevention, accountability, and early response. Second, we urge that the Durban Plus 25 reflections fully address the evolving and transnational nature of incitement, particularly in digital spaces. The role of online platforms in amplifying dangerous narratives cannot be overlooked. Prevention and early warning mechanisms under the DDPA must therefore be strengthened and adapted to remain credible and effective in the rapidly changing environment. Rwanda stands ready to work with member states, UN mechanism, and civil society to translate these commitments into concrete action. I thank you.
Thank you very much, all of the speakers, and also for the audience to be here. So we've seen that one of the issues that was raised here is that hate speech and impunity for hate speech leads to cycles of violence, and that there is a need to address these issues in concrete terms. So we've had speakers who invited us for a partnership, bilateral and multilateral partnership between member states, but also between civil society, media, and other types of organizations. There's a real need for a universal and a more collective program and system to address the issue of hate speech and dangerous speech that I discussed earlier, which leads to cycles of violence. We've also discussed the importance of monitoring, especially of digital platforms, and have more regulations of those platforms that enhance, that exacerbate hate speech and violence. We invite you to feel free to reach out to any of the speakers today who are experts in their fields. I myself also work on hate speech as a researcher and academic, so please feel free to reach out to us individually. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow for more discussion or more exchange on this, but thank you very much for being here today.
Your gateway to East Africa.